Give generously. Point microphone at your mouth. Do not move lectern nor disturb cables. All right. It was late in the conference. Thank you so much to Wyatt and Barbara for your hospitality and the way you welcome all of us and make a family of us. And, a functional family, not like other families. To Megan and Adam, I'd like to thank all of the staff individually, but I'm afraid I'm going to forget people, so I'm not going to maybe go down that route. I would like a special thank you to Nathaniel, who has helped with the translation workshop and printed out some poems for me. Thank you to Charles Martin, my partner in rhyme, and and also translation, and to our wonderful workshop, who have been a model, I think, of being both really smart and really kind. And just a reminder that these two things are not mutually exclusive. So I'm going to start with a few uncollected poems on the theory that if they flop, you'll have forgotten them by the end. It was actually kind of an older poem, but I thought it might be fun to read. Several years ago, many years ago now, there was a biography that came out of Edna St. Vincent Millay, which many of you may have read, Savage Beauty. And we'd moved to Greece, and I was reading this really thick biography of this woman poet who had had a very, very wild life. I mean, this is a biography. You're just, every page, you're like, what? And I just turned to my husband, and I was like, should I be wilder? Should I have been wilder? He was like, no. That is not the message you're supposed to be getting from this book. But, I got a poem out of it. After reading the biography, Savage Beauty, I'd like to write sonnets, a dozen a day, compose a libretto and maybe a play. My lustrous red hair would be crowned with the bay if I were like Edna, St. Vincent Millay. I'd like to have lovers, both straight ones and gay. I'd like to hold both sexes under my sway and not give two figs about what people say, like Edna St. Vincent Millay. I'd like to throw tantrums and get my own way. I'd like to be fresh as a young Beaujolais and slyly bewitching as Morgan Le Fay, like Edna St. Vincent Millay. I'd move with the grace of one trained in ballet. My husband would not only love, but obey. People would flock to my readings and pay. If I were like Edna St. Vincent Millay. Thank you, wine night. My two children are here in the front row. I don't think that will last through the whole reading. Some of you may remember maybe my first reading here, which I think was at the very challenging 4:15 slot. And my son was in the front row and might have been the age of my daughter, and sort of crept closer and closer in horror towards the lectern and eventually flung himself in abject boredom at my feet. There's photographic evidence of this. Anyway, so I'm going to read a couple of poems to my kids. I'm going to do it now because I don't know if they're going to last the whole reading. This is a new poem for Atalanta, and it's called Letter. Daughter, yours is a different alphabet. For every word I know, you know another. You are only half mine and half a language hard to learn. In America, when I point out geese winging overhead, a wedge aimed like an arrow out of winter, I say, look, they are flying in a V. The metaphor's so old it's lost its spell, although it's new to you. And yet you read the white shield of the sky laconically, Maybe, you say, a V that's upside down. Or lambda, adding, for me, a Greek L. Some of you will, where's my book? Some of you may have heard me talk about the fact that I have had a very long relationship with Sewanee, starting actually when I was 13 or 14, and I came here to music camp. And then I came back here as a scholar to this conference, which helped me process the trauma of music camp. And, but yeah, I came here, like I was sitting at the cool kids table. And I hope. Maybe not for me to judge. Anyway, but I realized that mostly what I got out of music was vocabulary and metaphors. So I guess, I'm a poet. So this is actually a poem for Jason, when you were 3. Yeah. So this is Listening to Peter and the Wolf with Jason, age 3. Eyes wide open, grinning ear to ear, balanced between the thrill of fear and fear, he clutches at my skirt to keep me near and will not let me leave him by himself in the living room where Peter and the Wolf emerges from the speakers on the shelf. He likes Peter's jaunty swing of strings, the reedy waddle of the duck, the wings that flute up in the tree, but still he clings, even though for now it's just the cat picking its sneaky way through sharp and flat. He isn't frightened of a clarinet and laughs at grandfather's bluster and bassoon, but keeps his ear out for another tune at the shadowy edge of the wood and coming soon. Where is the wolf? He asks me every chance he gets, and I explain each circumstance, though it's not as if he's heard it only once. You'd think he'd know by now. Deep in the wood, or under the tree, or sent away for good to the zoo, I say. And think he's understood, and weary of the question and the classic, I ask him where the wolf is. With grave logic, he answers me, the wolf is in the music. And so it is. Just then, out of the gloom, the cymbal menaces, the French horns loom, and the music is loose. The music's in the room. Yeah, so you can steal from your children. So I'm going to read some. We've been talking in a workshop, I think, about imitation and these things, and so this is certainly a response poem, maybe an imitation, maybe it's wholesale theft. There's a wonderful X.J. Kennedy song called Little Elegy, which I invite you to look up, but don't compare this poem to that one, because I don't know how it would fare. Jump rope song. The rope that makes of air a sphere, or else a grin from ear to ear, is something earthbound feet must clear. When the parabola swings round right before the snapping sound, you have to float above the ground. The trick is tempo, neither slow nor fast, and rhyming as you go, and then forgetting what you know. The end of every glad endeavor. You count until the numbers sever, since nobody can skip forever. We live in Greece. Some of you may know that. It's been a very dramatic time to be living in Greece. It's been kind of a challenge to me as a poet to know how to deal with that. I have been writing more, I don't know whether they're political exactly, but they're occasional, where I'm confronting current events more. And I'm interested in that in a couple of ways, I realize. I've recently been thinking a lot about Byron and writing about Byron. I'm interested in poetry's relationship to prophecy. In some ways, an occasional poem, which you think is only for this occasion, ends up speaking to the future, which sometimes that's unfortunate. And And prophecies are always about the present. And then they have a way of changing how you think about the past. We've been watching kind of with horror about these fires in Athens, and I realized I had written a poem. Point microphone. Okay. I had written a poem in 2007 when we had another spate of fatal and really devastating wildfires, and I was just thinking of looking back at that now, and unfortunately, it's still very topical. So this is Athens, August 2007, but obviously it could have any number of titles. Were it not August, I'd have called it snow, the way the sky sagged low enough to touch, and fragments of some blank, pluperfect silence came floating out of it, and in the street how people marveled and held out their hands as if to catch bright feathered hexagons. Were it not August with that lurid light, I would have thought the hush that hung in air was the hush of snow, and that the flakes we swept out of the yard were snowflakes. But it was the dead of summer, the air was dry as death, and what we'd thought was snow were needles once, entire forests cremated to ash. There was no water left, or we'd have wept. And I've written various poems. Actually, I teach it's not really a workshop, I don't know what it is. I lead a group of refugee women, and we write poems even though we don't share language, and it's kind of an interesting thing. So we've ended up being, my husband's a journalist, so very kind of involved or embroiled in the refugee crisis in Greece. And we're now getting more and more people just coming out of Turkey who are leaving for their own reasons. This news story struck me. This was 4th of May, 2017, but I wasn't able to write about it for about a year. And I don't even know if this is successful, but I still keep trying to write about it. Again, this goes back to weirdly Sewanee and music camp. For a young Turkish violinist drowned on the Aegean crossing a year ago. Reports said you were found clutching the case containing your instrument as well as music of your own composition. You knew what it was to place faith in a hollow wooden vessel carried on lilts of harmonic motion as scales rippled through your finger ridges. I think of Arion of Lesbos and his harp, saved by a dolphin in the legend, of accidentals flat and sharp, of pitch and yaw. I think of the deep sound of the bow rolling across arpeggios. No bridge but the violin's bridge. I was recently asked by a poet friend who was teaching a class he was going to do on echo poems, and we were talking about examples we knew of echo poems. Greg Williamson has a set of wonderful echo and narcissus poems, which I always teach when I'm doing echo poems. So he's one of my models, and she said, but I don't know of hardly any examples of women who have written them. Sort of interesting. I knew of one by Diane Teal, a wonderful poem, and she said, could you write one? And I realized that I had taught this as an exercise, which happens a lot, but I hadn't actually tried it myself. So this is my stab. So what's going to happen is I'm going to read the line, and then there's an echo at the end of the line, which is as if it's the echo. So I guess the poem could be read in a couple of different ways, but I'm just going to read it straight across. Okay, echo. What tales we tell, what tales? What ails? About the girls gone quiet, yet the storytelling ones once, who entertained the heart, art, till suddenly they ceased, eased. What makes the tongue inert, hurt? What turns the voice to swords, words? cutting the throat, what aches, the name from the alibi, I, of the body. We were stern, stories we said are lies, ice. We told her, don't repeat them, eat them. We talked in the translation workshop a little bit about Cavafy, and one of the things about, Greece and the refugee crisis and so forth is you're constantly in a Cavafy poem. You're talking to some sad young man from Damascus about, it's very strange. So I started sometimes translating Cavafy poems or sometimes writing kind of imitations of Cavafy poems. So this is Days of 2016, and you'll see it sort of shaped in that kind of Cavafy divided manner. He'd been a sculptor on a small scale in a town south of Damascus. He'd worked in stone. His masterpiece, he said, was a mother and child, no bigger than this, and showed his fingernail. The tools he needed were like the tools used by opticians, tiny screwdrivers, little files, stone he could find, even in central Athens, this shabby neighborhood. Sometimes he mused in front of the figures, marble and white-eyed, on days when the museum was free, statues larger than men, but broken-limbed youths magnified with time, older by eons than many who have died. His children, his wife were safe. Praise be to God. But so much had been destroyed, his life's work lost. The lion consumed all. Lion, he said. That's what it means in Arabic, Assad. All right. Sea daffodils. I became obsessed with sea daffodils. Which you find wild on beaches in Greece, but they're kind of endangered, but they appear in these wonderful frescoes in Knossos, and it's just, you come upon them and they're so wild and beautiful and have this wonderful fragrance, and so I'm trying to deal with that. Sea daffodils. How the tattooed day trippers nearly trampled them like flotsam, not blossoms. How it was illegal to pick them on Santorini, yet matrons gathered bouquets of them to their black-clad bosoms. How, beside the seaside parking lot, in a moon-bleached waste, they seemed both dissolute and chaste. How they danced in bridal white on the beach as awaiting the sacrifice that will unbridle the snorting winds, if it suffice. How briefer than youth they are, more fragile than plighted troth, and only pollinated by the hawk moth, the dithering moth that only flies when the winds are nearly becalmed. How in winter they turn inward, self-embalmed, in their papery layers of onion-stingy bulbs, jar-like canopic. How older than any epic. How they meadow the edges of islands when they make land, shuttling their ropey roots through the weft of unraveling sand. How, you've said, I've said, English daffodils misspell archaic and infernal asphodel. How once their tattered banners of surrender have been furled, they hunker from the world, to bristle again like the wan shades of warriors sprung out of battle. How their seed pods, makeshift sistrums, rattle with seeds like black dice, like flinders of volcanic glass, but light as styrofoam or pumice, to float out and deploy, swart as the hollow hulls that sailed for Troy among the trackless sea roads, bobbing in the waves like jettisoned life jackets, then planted in shallow graves, above which the wind vowels, circumflexed, Erasmian. How this perfume neither tuberose nor jasmine has shipwrecked here in their alabaster chalices such langueurs from the faded frescoes of Minoan palaces. So I'm very excited to have this book out, which I've been talking about for years and years and years, which is Hesiod's Works and Days. Hesiod is probably the first poet who names himself in Western literature. He's the first poet with a bio, and therefore also the first poet with like a blurb. So basically he tells us, I am Hesiod from Askra, and I won a big prize. He's our first poet, maybe a cusp of the 8th century. Anyway, so this poem, Works and Days, which is a very weird poem, it's about justice and about how the world is going to hell in a handbasket and politicians are corrupt. And it's weirdly topical in its ways. So it was kind of interesting to be translating this poet who is very concerned about debt and work during this debt crisis, this economic crisis in Greece, because some of the exact same words, exactly the same as were in Hesiod, who writes in this Homeric dialect and may even be older than Homer, and many ancients thought he was, would appear in Hesiod and then in the headlines as I was doing this translation. So debt, kreos is exactly the same, kerdos, profit, the marketplace, all of these things are really the same words. So that was kind of interesting. And then when I would explain to Greeks in Athens, I'm translating this poet, he lives in this village, and they're like, oh, yeah, tell me more about him. I'm like, well, he's in a lawsuit with his brother over his inheritance. I'm like, yeah, who isn't? So he ends up being very topical. But what I did finally, after years and years, turn in, I think I took this contract when Atalanta was born, and years and years, and I sort of present this translation to my editor at Penguin, and, they were like, wait, this poem is like 830 lines long. And I said, yes, and I'm going to go write a really long introduction. So I thought I'd read a little bit where we get his biography, because it's really strange. I had thought as a student reading Hesiod that he was misogynistic and boring and crusty and all of these things. And then I read him and I realized, he's kind of got a sense of humor. He's kind of funny. And he's lyrical. So in this 830-line poem that's supposed to teach you how to farm or something, he spends a lot of that poem just describing, how beautiful winter is or summer is. And, he's a poet. He's showing off. So I'm going to read a passage from this. 60 winter days, beyond the year's turning, is when Arcturus first appears, rising out of the ocean's sacred stream, and at the point of dusk will brightly gleam. Next, the swallow, Pandion's child, will wing into sight, dawn weeper, harbinger of spring. Best prune your vines, beat her while you've a chance. But when house holler, that would be the snail, clambers up the plants from the grounds, fleeing the Pleiades, forget hoeing your vines. Now rouse your slaves and whet your scythes, shun shady spots and lying in till dawn at harvest, when sun withers the skin. No time to waste now, get your crop inside, rise early so the harvest will provide. 1/3 of work is dawn's own share to ask. Dawn lights the path, dawn offers you the task, dawn shows herself and sets men on their way. Dawn yokes the oxen at the break of day. And this, when thistle blooms and the loud cicada rings in a tree and shrills from underneath his wings, clear, ceaseless song in toilsome summertime. That's when she-goats are fattest, wine is prime, women are lustiest, and men instead are at their weakest. Parched in knees and head by Sirius, and the heats made their skin dry. Then let there be a shady rock nearby, and bibbling wine, some good baked bread to eat, cheese from goats just drying up, some meat from a forest-browsing cow with never a calf, and also meat from firstling kids. Then quaff some fire-bright wine stretched in that shady place. And when you've had your fill and turned your face into the fresh wind, make offering from an ever-flowing, clear, untroubled spring. Pour 3 parts water to 1 part of wine. But if a yearning seizes you to royal and stormy seamanship, when the Pleiades fling Orion sink in cloudy seas, that's when all kinds of wind blasts rage. Don't keep your ship any longer on the wine dark deep, but work the earth and mind what I command. Now's when to draw your ship up on dry land. And he gives some shipping advice to his brother. And it seems kind of strange because Hesiod basically says he doesn't have any experience with ships. So range the freight in its hold. Get ready, he's telling his brother. From the profit you'll bring home, just like our father, you great fool. Perses, our father, mine, and yours, who failing a better living took up ships and sailing. He came here in his black ship over the sea, forsaking Aeolian Cheme, so he might flee, not wealth, nor riches, nor prosperity, but evil need Zeus given. So their father has failed at shipping. This is the whole reason they are in mainland Greece in the first place. He settled down near Helicon in Ascra, wretched town, bad in winter, harsh in summer, not ever pleasant. We've gone to visit modern Ascra, and this is not on any of their materials or brochures. But you, Perses, take thought of the ripe time for the task, and most of all for seafaring with boats. Admire the small, but load a large one. More cargo, more gain, profit on profit. That is, if squalls remain. Then we get a little bit of Hesiod's sort of backstory. But if your foolish heart's hell-bent on trade, and you aim to flee glum hunger and evade debt, for you I'll fathom the sounding sea, landlubber though I am, since as for me, I've never sailed the broad sea on a ship, not yet, except to Euboea, my one trip from Aulis. So when I was reading this as a student, in Athens, Georgia, I didn't realize that this journey is about 125 feet. It's a joke. It's the shortest sea journey you can make in Greece. There's a bridge. Where once waiting in winter's grip, the Greeks mustered a great host to deploy from holy Hellas against fair woman Troy. That is where I crossed to Chalcis once for the funeral games established by the sons of Amphidamas, great of heart. And I won, you hear, with a hymn, and took the tripod by the ear and offered it to the muses of Helicon right at the spot where they first set me on the path of clear-voiced song. So it's, and I won this prize. Hesiod. Let's give it up for Hesiod. He hasn't had that much applause in a long time. And this book will be out in September. Again, I think all the books that are coming out are roughly Atalanta's age. So they're as old as my youngest child. You can figure that out. So after a Greek proverb, and I won't translate the Greek proverb because you'll figure it out. Ouden monimoteron tu prosorinu. We're here for the time being, I answer to the query. Just for a couple of years, we said, a dozen years back. Nothing is more permanent than the temporary. We dined sitting on folding chairs. They were cheap, but cheery. We've taped the broken window pane. TV's still out of whack. We're here for the time being, I answer to the query. When we crossed the water, we only brought what we could carry, but there are always boxes that you never do unpack. Nothing is more permanent than the temporary. Sometimes when I'm feeling weepy, you propose a theory. Nostalgia and tear gas have the same acrid smack. We're here for the time being, I answer to the query. We stash bones in the closet when we don't have time to bury, stuff receipts in envelopes, file papers in a stack. Nothing is more permanent than the temporary. 12 years now, and we're still eating off the ordinary. We left our wedding china behind, afraid that it might crack. We're here for the time being, we answer to the query, but nothing is more permanent than the temporary. You can hold your applause. Half of my poems are effing bird poems. Where would we be without them? And I'm hoping someone is now putting that anthology together. Crow, gentleman. Pacing to and fro along the autumn shore, among the wrack and reek, with your arms clasped behind your back and sporting your gray frock coat trimmed in black, and your black hat and your lean, long-legged stride, up and down the strand, perusing the headlines of the tide, casualties and statistics, futures, stocks, the 1,000 natural shocks. You clear your throat, inspecting the ink-black seaweed tossed among the rocks like obsolete typewriter ribbons, rusty widow's weeds, scanning the flotsam for morsels cast up by the remorseless gossip of the sea's ominous grease. How elegant you are, everyone concedes, gentleman crow, with your gimlet gaze, your sardonic beak. How omnivorous, how sleek. Life is a joke you crack, wry and amusing, and death a dainty snack. The book is named, for better or worse, it's named Like. The reviews write themselves. And and I'm hoping that people will sort of get that it's not just like the cutesy social media reference, but it's the simile that is at the heart of the entire poetic program or something. But there is a poem called, well, it was called Sistina Like, but now it is called Like the Sistina, because I just decided to put everything in alphabetical order, except there were like 2 poems that didn't fit, and I just changed their titles. You can do that. So for those of you who are playing poetic form bingo, we have had Villanelle already, and this is a Sistina. So as you know, with the Sistina, there are 6 words at the end of the lines, and they repeat in this mathematical permutation. So you'll hear 6 words repeating in a different pattern over 6 stanzas, and then there's an envoy where all 6 words have to get in. Like. Now we're all friends. There is no love but like. A semi-demi-goddess. Something like a reality TV star look-alike, named Simile or Me Too. So we like in order to be liked. It isn't like there's love or hate now. Even plain dislike is frowned on. There's no button for it. Like is something you can quantify. Each like you gather's almost something money-like, token of virtual support. Please like this page to stamp out hunger, and you'd like to end hunger and climate change alike. But it's unlikely, like does diddly, like. Just twiddles its unopposing thumbs up. Likewise props up scarecrow silences. I'm like so over him, I overhear, but like he doesn't get it. Like, he's like, it's all okay. Like, I don't even like him anymore, whatever. I'm all like, take Take like out of our chat, we'd all alike flounder agape, gesticulating like a foreign film, sans subtitles, fall like dumb phones to mooted desuetude. Unlike with other crutches, when we use like, we're not just buying time on credit. Like displaces other words. Crowds cuckoo like endangered hatchlings from the nest. Click like if you're against extinction. Like is like invasive zebra mussels, or it's like those nutria things, or kudzu, or but like redundant fast food franchises, each like more like the next. Those poets who dislike inversions, archaisms, who just like plain English as she spoke. Why isn't like there literally every other word? I'd like us just to admit that's what real speech is like. But as you like, my friend, yes, we're alike how we pronounce, say, lichen, and dislike cancer and war. So like this page, click like. The Sistina also hasn't gotten that much applause in a long time. So one of the things I was working on this Hesiod translation, maybe not as diligently as Hesiod would have liked, and but in the meantime, I was writing poems about Pandora. Hesiod's the first poet we get with the Pandora and the jar, not the box, story. So this is one of the many poems about Hesiod while I was supposed to be finishing Hesiod. Pandora. It was the Iron Age. The men had been drinking. Those two surly brethren, hindsight and forethought, they sent her down to the cellar to fetch more booze, even though she murmured, "You've both had enough." Forethought, at least, you'd think, would eschew a hangover, but then he was always cocky. He'd filched sparks from the gods and hadn't foreguessed. Nickname aside, the prank would backfire. His liver hadn't yet begun to creak as if an eagle tore it each morning. Hindsight, her husband, of course, remorsed their marriage. He'd said she was a punishment from Zeus and that virginity made for a sorry dowry, depreciating soon as you drove it off the lot. There was just a dram in the drained keg, and that she thought she'd drink herself. Dregs be damned. Broach a new cask. They were huge, a fathom tall. A man could drown in them, set deep in the floor so you could reach the mouth. She pried open the charactered seal with only her grappling fingers, but the wine had vinegared, or worse. What fumes, acrid with notes of brimstone. Flies belched out. Hindsight would give her what for tonight for sure. Ouch. Just then the baby gave a disgruntled kick right behind where she would have had a belly button if she'd been born, instead of just made up by poets. Hindsight hankered for sons, more braces of hands for his failure of a farm. But if it were a daughter, she'd have some company and name her Heather maybe, or Hope. So I think the spirit animal of the conference has been the crazy chicken. This has come up in several of the effing bird poems. But I don't have any chicken poems, but we rent this place. My evil eye shawl is coming off. I feel vulnerable. All right. And anyway, we rent this place on a Greek island. It's very idyllic and wonderful. Greek island problem. So the Greek island problem in this island is feral peacocks. They're everywhere, and one or two peacocks are nice, and they breed. They breed like they pullulate. Actually, I guess there is a rooster in here. I take that back. And I was very grateful to the Sewanee Review for publishing this poem. Peacock feathers. A plague of feral peafowl in the garden. I know, who knew? Now decimates the grapes, makes salad of the young geraniums, dust-ups of dust baths in denuded planters. They leave ubiquitous piles of poo as drab as any other poo. They make that sound as if of something throttled in the jungle. or honk to out-goose geese. They're worse than roosters at judging dawn. Say 4 a.m. The moon, when full, rattles them off, one after the other. There's something else to fight about. You swear, come autumn, you'll take up a rifle. Blam! Are we the sort who murder birds? Sometimes they catch us off guard with pure pulchritude, the sheer implausibility of it, sublime unlikelihood. And when they molt, the garden sprouts a ferny iridescence dazzled with targets. Sometimes I think of Argos, monster with a myriad sleepless eyes set to spy on Jove or ward his mistress, fabled insomnia of the suspicious spouse. Her pet slain, Juno gathers the glamour of glares, still watchful in a fan of green-blue feathers, unlucky things to bring into the house. Save the applause. This will be 3-poem warning. So we've been talking a lot about syllabics in class. And so I feel like I should demonstrate one. So this is in what I would call haiku-shaped stanzas. I understand they're not haiku, but 5, 7, 5. Placebo. No can do. I am doctor not of medicine, but Latinity. I am the future, singular, indicative. The first person. What do you take me for? If is a real condition. If I'm a pill, then you are double blind. What you don't know can't hurt you. Spoonful of sugar, it's all in your head, this dendritic alchemy of pain. Nothing works. I have a lot of sort of refugee-ish poems, things that come into poems. So I had a lot of different ones, like little epigrams and stuff, and I just sort of stuck them all. This is what poets do this a lot. So there are a lot of poems, and they're maybe kind of slight on their own, but then you can give it an overarching title, and then there's sections. And so I'm just going to read the first section of Refugee Fugue. And it again came from this realization that my kids are playing happily in the Aegean, and they're making their sandcastles, and the same water that is touching them is drowning other children of the same age. And I've been very lucky, actually. This has been put to music by a wonderful band. So Aegean Blues. The sea is for holiday makers, summer on the beach. Surely there is space enough to spread a towel for each. Dry land isn't something you should pray to reach. Look how glad our kids are making their sandy town, and how they build the battlements the laughing waves tear down. But it's the self-same water where some swim and others drown. The sea is full of dangers, the shallows and the deep. The sea is full of treasures down there, 5 fathoms deep. The sea is full of salt. There are no more tears to weep. The ferryman says we cross tonight, and everyone pays cash. Charon, don't take MasterCard. You have to pay him cash. The water seems so calm tonight, you hardly hear the splash. There was a boy named Icarus, old Daedalus's son. He turned into a waxwing, black against the sun, drowned because he tried to fly. He's not the only one. Why would a kid lie in the sand and not take off his shoes? Why would he lie there face down, the color of a bruise? The sea can make you carefree, nothing left to lose. There's indigo and turquoise, there's cobalt, sapphire, navy, and there's a dark like wine, my love, out there where things get wavy. Listen, that's the worry note, reminds me of my baby. Thought I would end on an Effenberg poem. And this conference, I know you all will be excited for me, and I'm excited. So this is supposed to be in the next New Yorker, and I'm very excited. Swallows. Every year, the swallows come and put their homestead in repair and raise another brood and skim and boomerang through summer air and reap mosquitoes from the hum of holidays, a handsome pair, one on the nest, one on the wire. Cheat, 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 the two conspire to murder half the insect race and feed them squirming to their chicks. They work and fret at such a pace and natter in between with clicks and churs. They lift the raftered place, seaside taverna, with their tricks of cursive loops and Morse code call, both analog and digital. They seem to us so coupled, married, so flustered with their needful young, so busy housekeeping, so harried. It's hard to picture them among the origins of myth, a buried secret, rape, a cut-out tongue, two sisters wronged where there's no right, till transformation fledges flight. But Ovid swapped them in the tale, so that the sister who was forced becomes instead the nightingale, who sings as though her heart would burst. It's Ovid's stories that prevail, and thus the swallow is divorced twice from her voice, her tuneless chatter, and no one asks her what's the matter. These swallows, though, don't have the knack for sorrow, or we'd not have guessed. Though smartly dressed in tailored black, spend no time mourning, do not rest. One scissors forth, one zigzags back. They take turns settled on the nest or waiting on a perch nearby to zero in on wasp or fly. They have no time for tragic song. As dusk distills, they dart and flicker. The days are long, but not as long as yesterday. The night comes quicker, and soon the season will be wrong. Knackered, cross, they bitch and bicker like you and me. They never learn, and every summer they return.